She threw a rock at a stop sign. That was the first thing I saw her do. Middle of the day, mid-April, sun blazing down like it hated us all, and this woman, this not young, not old, not anyone you'd notice woman, just walked right up to the edge of the parking lot, picked up a rock, and chucked it at a rusted stop sign. It clanged like a cheap cymbal and made her flinch, and for a second, she looked like she regretted it. But then she laughed. Not a polite laugh, not one of those closed-mouth things you do in public. She tilted her head back and laughed like someone who wasn't worried about being heard. I'd never seen her before, and I knew the whole neighborhood. I was sitting on the curb outside the campus library, pretending to read while actually just watching people and wasting time between classes. And she didn't belong, she didn't have that student look, no lanyard, no earbuds, no backpack. Her heels made her taller, and the way she carried her shoulders made her seem even more distant from the crowd of 20-somethings that shuffled past without a second glance. I didn't mean to stare, but she noticed. She locked eyes with me and gave me this little smile, like we were both in on the same joke, and then she walked off like she hadn't just performed a random act of vandalism next to the university quad. I saw her again 2 days later at the laundromat on East 7th, the one with the broken soda machine and the flickering fluorescent lights. She was pulling damp clothes out of one of the big industrial dryers, folding each piece with this tired elegance like she used to do it for someone else but didn't care enough to rush anymore. Her phone buzzed on the plastic chair beside her, and she ignored it 3 times. She looked up, noticed me sitting 2 rows over, and after a second of recognition, she spoke. "You ever feel like burning it all down?" she asked, not in a serious way, but like a test. "Depends what it is," I said, too fast, too eager, but something about the way she looked at me made me forget to be awkward. She nodded like that was the right answer and went back to folding a towel. "It's always something," she said. "Job, house, the version of yourself people expect to see." I asked her if she lived nearby and she laughed again, the same raw sound from the stop sign day. "Let's just say I'm passing through," she said, and I didn't know if that meant the neighborhood or something bigger. I didn't ask her name, not then. I didn't even ask what she did or why she seemed so comfortable sitting barefoot in a public place like the dirty tile floor couldn't touch her. We talked about stupid things for almost an hour. Commercial jingles that got stuck in your head, bad first jobs, the time I accidentally called a professor mom. She made me feel clever, but not in a fake way, like I was saying things she actually wanted to hear. And when her laundry was done and folded into a perfect square of a life she clearly didn't care to maintain, she stood, looked at me, and said, "You don't talk like a college boy." I told her that was probably the nicest insult I'd ever gotten, and she smirked. "You'll be back here Friday?" she asked, like she already knew. "I can be," I replied, and she nodded without another word and walked out. On Friday, I was there half an hour early. She didn't show up until the machines were halfway through their cycles. This time she brought a book of short stories and a bag of pretzels. She didn't sit across from me. She sat beside me like it was normal, like we'd done it 100 times before. She offered me a pretzel. I took one. She didn't ask what I was studying or what my plans were. She didn't care, and that made me care more than I should have. We talked about nothing again, and then she asked if I wanted to go for a walk. We ended up by the river, sitting on a bench, watching the lights across the water flicker and smear like oil. That's when I told her my name. Just said it, as if she'd asked. She looked at me and said, "I'm Marion," and it didn't feel like a real name. It felt like a placeholder. But I didn't ask. I just nodded. We sat in silence for a long time, and I could feel something happening, like the beginning of a story neither of us had agreed to write. And right before she got up to leave, she touched my hand, not a flirtatious touch, not something meant to lead anywhere. Just a human, simple touch that said she wasn't numb anymore. "That's the first time I've felt like myself in a long while," she said, almost like an apology, and then she walked off into the night. I didn't follow her. But I would. The rumors started like all rumors do, loud enough to notice, quiet enough to deny. It was the 4th time I'd met Marion at that laundromat, and we were no longer pretending to be strangers. I was doing laundry more often than I needed to, burning through clean shirts just to have an excuse to see her. She never said much about her life beyond our conversations. I never asked about a husband or a family. I didn't want to know anything that might make it harder to keep going. She never brought up my age, and I stopped noticing hers unless someone reminded me. At first, it was just some glances from a couple of regulars at the coffee shop near campus. Two of them whispered something to each other after I said I'd be working a double shift. When I stepped away, they said my name and laughed. I didn't care at first, but it kept happening, half sentences in crowded rooms, someone saying, "Isn't she old enough to be his?" and trailing off like it was a game of fill in the blank. I heard the full sentence for the first time in the back of the art history lecture hall, where I was supposed to be helping one of the assistants' catalog project submissions. One of the grad students leaned into the guy next to him and said, "That's the one sleeping with the woman from Riverside. The one with the heels and the grocery bags." Then he made a face, like he was biting a lemon. I didn't say anything. I finished the paperwork and left early. That night, I told myself I was imagining it, but the next time I met Marion, I noticed the way the woman behind the counter at the pizza shop paused before handing me the receipt, like she was doing math in her head. We sat outside, splitting a slice, and Marion must have seen the look on my face because she stopped mid-chew and asked, "What happened?" "There are rumors," I said, staring at the pepperoni I didn't want to finish. She leaned back and gave a tired smile, not surprised. "You think people aren't going to talk when they don't understand something?" "It's not that they don't understand," I said, "it's that they think they do." She nodded and didn't say anything for a bit. Then she picked up her crust and held it like a microphone. "Do they think you're being taken advantage of?" she asked, joking lightly, but I could see in her eyes she wasn't amused. "Worse," I said. "They think I'm doing it for fun. For shock value. Or maybe I have some mom issues they can't wait to analyze." "Do you?" she asked. "No." She paused, chewed slowly, then asked, "Do you want to stop?" I didn't answer right away because I didn't know. It would have been easier. Walk away before it got worse. Let her be a good memory instead of a complicated truth. But easy didn't mean better. "I don't want to stop," I said finally. "But I also don't want to be the story people pass around in dorm rooms." "That's not something we can control," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand like she didn't care if anyone was watching. "You want clean edges, but this thing doesn't have them." Later that week, I got a letter. Not an email, not a message, an actual letter. Folded neatly, slid under my door. I opened it thinking it was something from campus housing, maybe another fine for leaving my bike on the wrong rack. But it wasn't. No return address. No name. Just a note written in all caps, telling me that everyone knew what I was doing, that it was pathetic, that people were talking behind my back and I should be ashamed. It said I was embarrassing myself. That if I had any dignity, I'd end it before it got worse. I read it twice. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with something heavier, this quiet, low sort of heat that built behind my eyes. I didn't show it to Marion. I almost did. I even folded it back up and slid it into my jacket pocket, thinking maybe I'd bring it out the next time we met. But I didn't. I couldn't. I didn't want to see that tired look in her eyes again. I didn't want her to feel like she'd become someone's accusation. Instead, I called her later that night. I don't know why. We didn't talk on the phone often. But I needed to hear her voice. When she answered, she sounded like she'd been reading or writing or doing something that took her far away, and my call brought her back too fast. "I missed you today," she said, like it wasn't the first thing she meant to say, but it came out anyway. "I needed to hear your voice," I replied, pacing my room while my roommate was out. "You sound different," she said. People are starting to notice. And I'm trying to figure out if that changes anything." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathe, not in a dramatic way, just soft and steady. "Do you want it to change anything?" she asked. "No," I said. "But it might." That silence again, like the world had paused for a second just so we could feel the weight of our choices. "I've lived through worse than a whisper," she said finally. "But if you haven't, I understand." "I don't want to quit," I said. "But I'm scared I'll regret not quitting." "Then regret something real," she said, and it landed harder than I thought it would. I didn't know if she meant herself or me or what we were building in the spaces between who we were supposed to be. I only knew that her voice made me feel still, even when everything around me was starting to shake. We didn't say goodbye. She just said, "Come see me this weekend," and I said I would. Then she hung up. The letter stayed in my drawer, untouched. I never found out who wrote it. I stopped caring. The apartment she rented was small, high up, and overlooked the corner of a street where nothing interesting ever happened. I started spending more nights there, mostly weekends, sometimes weekdays when I could invent a reason not to be anywhere else. Marian didn't decorate much. Her furniture was plain and mismatched, nothing trendy, no attempt at hiding the fact that she didn't expect anyone else to care. The only thing she took seriously was her books. Shelves of them, stacked in no particular order, some with notes in the margins, some torn from overuse. She always read at night. When I stayed over, I would fall asleep to the sound of her turning pages. Sometimes I watched her from the bed, the way she curled up in the armchair with her legs tucked under her, the light from the lamp falling on her face while everything else in the room stayed dim. She looked like someone who had given up on the idea of being seen and found a quiet satisfaction in it. The conversations started getting longer. Not just talk, but real things. She asked about the way I saw my future, and I lied a little because I didn't want to sound uncertain. I told her I was still figuring things out, which was technically true. She didn't laugh or reassure me. She said, "Good. People who have everything figured out at 22 are either lying or boring." I asked her why she left her old job and she said, "I got tired of trying to impress people who didn't matter." I didn't push further. She didn't offer details, and I didn't need them. Sometimes it was enough just to know that someone had already gone through the parts of life I hadn't reached yet. One night, around midnight, we sat on the fire escape drinking warm wine out of paper cups. She had her feet on the railing and was talking about a friend she used to have, a woman who got married too young, had 3 kids before she turned 30, and now spent most of her time pretending everything was fine. Marian said she'd almost gone down the same path once but walked away just in time. I asked her if she ever regretted it. She looked at me and said, "I regret not asking more questions. I regret trying so hard to be agreeable." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and looked out at the empty street. She leaned her head against the metal frame and said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm finally waking up, and it's terrifying because I don't know how long I was asleep." I remember that night clearly because it was the first time I saw her cry. Not a breakdown. Just a few quiet tears she wiped away with the sleeve of her hoodie, like she didn't want me to notice. I didn't say anything. I didn't move closer. I just sat there, not looking at her, letting her feel whatever she needed to feel. Later that night, she climbed into bed beside me and held onto my arm like she was afraid of drifting away in her sleep. I didn't move. We started getting reckless. Meeting in places where people could see us, holding hands when we thought no one was looking. I should have known it would catch up to us. It happened outside the campus bookstore. She had just dropped off a donation box, old books she said she didn't need anymore, and we ended up walking back to her car together. We weren't doing anything. I wasn't even touching her. But someone saw us. A guy I knew vaguely from my stats class. He was walking with a girl I didn't recognize, and he gave me this look, not even a smirk, just a stare like he knew something and couldn't wait to tell someone else. I tried to ignore it. I tried not to think about it. But that same night, while Marian was showering, I checked my phone and saw a message from a classmate. It said, "You're making a scene. Just a heads up." No name, no context, just that. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. When Marian came back into the room wearing a towel and drying her hair, I didn't say anything. I watched her move around the room like nothing had changed, but something had. The next day, people on campus acted different. Not everyone. Just enough to notice. Someone made a joke about older women being flexible in a group chat I didn't know I was still in. A girl I used to study with told me I should be careful who I trust because people talk. A professor I respected asked if I was alright with a tone that wasn't about grades. I felt the walls closing in, not around me, but around the version of myself I had tried to protect from judgment. That night, Marian asked me if something was wrong. I told her no, but she didn't believe me. "I can tell when you're holding something back," she said, standing in the doorway of the kitchen, holding a coffee mug with both hands like she was anchoring herself. "I just don't want to ruin this," I said, finally. "Ruin what?" she asked. "This," I repeated. "Us. Whatever this is." She set the mug down on the counter and came closer. "You're worried someone saw us." "I know someone did." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Let them. I'm tired of pretending I don't want to be seen." I didn't know what to say to that. I had spent so long trying to keep things quiet, trying to keep things safe, and here she was, daring me to be real. The next time we went out together, we didn't hide. And that's when the worst of it started. We didn't even make it through the front door of the gallery before everything started to go wrong. It was a local exhibit night, something open to the public and buzzing with enough small talk and fake enthusiasm to fill the room to capacity. Marian had dressed well, nothing flashy, just clean lines and quiet confidence. I'd never seen her with makeup on before, not really, but tonight she wore just enough to make me look twice when she opened the door for me back at her place. I told her she looked good and she rolled her eyes and said, "I'm not trying to impress anyone." Still, she smiled after she said it. We took a cab there, didn't hold hands in the car, didn't say much, but I could feel the edge of something bigger than usual in both of us. Maybe pride. Maybe nerves. The gallery wasn't fancy. It had exposed brick and bad lighting, the kind of place that relied on the crowd to feel important. The walls were filled with work from local artists, half of them probably art school dropouts. I didn't know anyone there at first, but Marian was immediately approached by a woman who hugged her like they hadn't seen each other in years. They talked for 5 minutes straight while I stood nearby and tried not to look uncomfortable. At one point, Marian reached back and placed her hand on my chest and said, "This is Ethan." The woman glanced at me, smiled without showing teeth, and said, "You must be one of her students." I said, "I'm not," and that was the end of that conversation. We moved deeper into the room. She pointed out pieces she liked, said what she liked about them. I nodded, tried to look like I understood, but my mind was elsewhere. Someone from my sociology class walked by, looked at me, looked at her, and didn't even try to hide the recognition. A whisper passed behind us like someone brushing their sleeve against my neck. I saw the message spread. One person turned to another, leaned in, eyes flicked toward us, then back down. It wasn't loud. But it was constant. At one point, Marian turned to me and said, "You're stiff. Are you all right?" "I just didn't think we'd be the main attraction," I said. "We're not," she said. "They'll move on." But they didn't. Not that night. The worst part happened near the end, when the crowd had thinned and I thought maybe we could sneak out without anything else being said. That's when someone I actually knew well, Dean, a guy from my program, someone I'd worked on a group project with just last semester, walked right up to us while we were standing near the back wall. He didn't look at Marian at first. He looked straight at me and said, "I gotta say, man, I didn't think you had the balls." Marian's body tensed next to me. Dean finally turned to her and said, "No disrespect, but wow." I opened my mouth to say something, but Marian spoke first. "What exactly are you trying to say?" Dean shrugged, the kind of shrug that said he'd already gotten what he wanted. "Nothing. Just people talk, that's all." "Then maybe listen less," she said, not raising her voice, not blinking. He nodded and walked away, grinning like a kid who just pulled the fire alarm. I didn't know what to do. Marian stepped away from me and walked straight out the gallery door without waiting. I followed her, fast, heart pounding like I was about to be hit. Outside, she didn't say anything for a minute. She stood near the curb, arms crossed, face blank. When I reached her, she turned and asked, "Was this a mistake?" "No," I said, not even thinking about it. "You looked embarrassed," she said. I was angry, I told her. "But not at you." "Then who?" I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had too many. "Them." Me. I don't know. I don't know what I expected. She took a breath and said, "You expected it to be easier." I didn't deny it. We took a cab back to her apartment in silence. She sat with her head against the window the entire ride. When we got inside, she didn't offer wine, didn't ask what I wanted to eat, didn't do any of the usual things. She walked into her room and started undressing without closing the door. I followed her, leaned in the doorway, watched as she pulled her dress off and tossed it on the bed. "I'm tired of feeling like a secret," she said. "You're not a secret," I replied. "Then why do you flinch every time someone looks at us too long?" I didn't answer, and she turned to face me fully. "You think I haven't seen this before?" she asked. "The way you go quiet after people stare. The way you look at the floor when someone says something." "It's not about them," I said, too quickly, knowing it sounded false. "It is," she said. "You're still trying to play both sides." "I'm trying to figure out how not to lose everything," I said. "What exactly do you think you'll lose?" "I don't know," I said. "Respect. Plans. People who used to trust me." She sat on the edge of the bed and looked up at me. "Then maybe this isn't something you can hold on to," she said. I stepped inside the room, sat beside her, didn't say anything. After a long silence, she reached out and took my hand. "I didn't start this just to watch it fall apart," she said. "But I won't pretend to be something I'm not to make it easier for you. I'm not asking you to pretend. I think you are." That night, for the first time, I didn't stay over. I kissed her before I left, slow and uncertain. She didn't say goodbye when I walked out. As I stepped into the cold night air, I realized we'd stopped being afraid of what we had and started being afraid of what it might cost. I waited 2 days before I called her again. I kept picking up the phone and putting it down, typing a message and deleting it, telling myself she probably didn't want to hear from me after the way I left. When I finally called, she answered before the second ring. Her voice was steady, but there was nothing soft in it. "I wasn't sure if I'd hear from you again," she said, not accusing me, just stating it like a fact. I didn't know what to say. "Then maybe that's something you should have said," she replied. "I didn't want to make things worse. You leaving without saying anything did that already." There was a long silence. I thought about hanging up, but she didn't. I said her name, and she didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke again, her voice had changed. "Do you still want this?" she asked. "I don't want anything else." "Then you have to stop apologizing to the world every time you look at me." "I'm not apologizing," I said, but we both knew that wasn't true. "Yes, you are. Every time someone stares, you look away. Every time someone whispers, you act like it confirms something. You don't get to do that anymore. I'm not good at this. I'm not asking for good. I'm asking for honest." "I was honest," I said. "I just didn't know if it was enough." She was quiet again, then said, "I'm not going to be your private mistake." "You're not? Then come with me tomorrow." "To what?" "There's a small conference at the museum. I'm speaking on a panel. Come with me. Sit next to me. Let people see us." It sounded simple, but I knew what it meant. It wasn't just a seat at some table in the back of a room. It was a choice. A public one. "I'll be there," I said. The next day I dressed better than usual. Clean shirt, nothing too formal, but better than the wrinkled things I usually wore to class. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't invite questions. I just showed up. The museum was busy, and the conference took place in one of those long glass rooms with rows of chairs and small folding tables. Marion was already inside when I arrived. She looked calm, maybe a little nervous, but when she saw me, her face didn't change much. Just a quick glance, just enough for me to know she'd been waiting. I took the seat next to hers. She didn't touch me, didn't say anything except, "Thanks for coming." Her voice was low, only for me. The panel began. She spoke clearly and confidently, answering questions about art and community and the shifting role of public spaces. She sounded like someone who belonged there. I watched her as the people in the room listened. Most of them had no idea who I was. But a few of them did. I saw one man near the back whisper to a woman beside him. I saw two younger attendees glance at each other and then at me. But I didn't move. I didn't look away. When the session ended, a small crowd gathered around the panelists. Marian answered questions. I stood beside her. I didn't try to act like anything other than what I was. She introduced me to two people. She didn't say I was a friend or a colleague or anything else vague. She just said, "This is Ethan," and left it at that. No one asked for more. But later, near the refreshment table, it happened again. A woman in her early 50s, tall, dressed well, approached Marian with a smile too wide to be genuine. She said hello, complimented her talk, and then looked directly at me. "And you must be Ethan," she said, like she'd practiced it. "I am," I said. "I've heard about you," she added, and her smile held steady. "I'm sure you have," I replied, without smiling back. Marian placed her hand lightly on my arm. It wasn't affectionate. It was grounding. The woman said, "You're braver than most," and then walked away. We stood there for a moment, not speaking. Marian looked up at me and said, "That's the last time I do one of these for a while." Because of her? Because of all of them. We don't have to hide. No, she said. But that doesn't mean I want to explain myself every 5 minutes either. After we left, we walked without talking. The street was crowded, but everything felt slower than usual. I asked if she wanted to go somewhere, but she shook her head. We walked to her place. Inside, she took off her coat, sat down, and pulled her knees to her chest on the couch. I sat across from her. I meant what I said, I told her. I'm not letting this fall apart. She didn't respond right away. I know, she said finally. But I don't know what happens now. Neither do I. So what do we do? We live, she said. We stop trying to win anyone's approval. We let the people who want to stay, stay. And we stop waiting for permission. And if it doesn't work? She looked at me then, really looked, and said, then at least we didn't waste it pretending it wasn't real. That night, I stayed. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. In the quiet, we understood something neither of us had wanted to say aloud. Not all things last. Not everything ends with certainty. But for once, we were both exactly where we chose to be. And whether anyone else understood it didn't matter anymore.